want to welcome everyone to the day two of the conference on inclusive governance, breaking the barriers to inclusive governance in Nigeria. The conference began yesterday. Yesterday we had two sessions. If you've been following, you'd notice that there have been a form of progression in the conference. We started yesterday with by examining human rights, how we can ensure that human rights are well enforced in Nigeria, because you cannot have an inclusive governance, you cannot have a democracy without human rights being guaranteed. And we had Barrister Lafenwa who took us through the first section yesterday, and that was immediately followed by the second session, which was we had Professor Pogosin. She presented on the youths and women in Nigeria's contemporary politics, challenges and prospects, and that gave us the opportunity to look at how we can integrate, how we can address the problem of marginalization, which largely affects youths and women in Nigeria's politics. And if you were with us yesterday, I believe you must have noticed that both speakers made mention of two important things. The first speaker, for instance, noted the fact that we need judicial reforms in Nigeria in order for us to be able to have an effective justice system. And the second speaker also mentioned the fact that we need government to create an enabling environment that would encourage youth to stay in Nigeria and develop the country as a way of addressing the constant brain drain syndrome that the country has been experiencing for the past couple of years. These two cogent points point to the fact that inclusive governance cannot just occur on its own. In other words, there is a role for the state to play in ensuring inclusive governance. And today, we are going to be having two sessions. The first session will be looking at the role of the state. In other words, what role, what part, what is the state meant to do in order for us to be able to have an inclusive governance in Nigeria. And in the second session, we'll be looking at the role of responsible citizenship. Being a citizen in a country does not, it's not just what it is. Being a citizen gives you certain responsibilities, certain duties, and that is what we'll be looking at in our second session. So the first session, which is the third session for the conference, will be beginning now, and I'll be calling on Mr. Samuel Ayoko to read the citation of our speaker and to invite our speaker to take the podium. Mr. Samuel, please.
All right, good morning, everyone.
Yeah, good morning.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. I'm most happy to be here this morning, and I'll be reading the citation. I'll be reading the citation of Dr. Lafenwa. Please just hold on. All right, this is just a short profile of Dr. Stephen Akinyemi Lafenwa. Dr. Lafenwa obtained his Doctor of Philosophy in Political Science in 2006 from the University of Ibadan, Nigeria. He specialized in public administration, legislative, and democratic studies. He was a laureate of Democratic Governance Institute of Codestra in 2006, and he attended the International Writing Workshop in Nairobi, Kenya, which was fully sponsored by Codestra. Dr. Lafenwa participated actively in the election observation and monitoring on behalf of International Republican Institute of the United States of America as an ad hoc official in different capacities for INEC since 1999. He is a public affairs analyst on radio, television, and other social media platforms. He was an active stakeholder of different civil society organizations like Citizen Forum for Constitutional Reform, Coalition for Change, Center for Constitutional Governance, among others. He was coordinator for Distant Learning Center program on political science from 2011 to 2016, and later became the program coordinator for social sciences, DLC courses, and course supervisor for GX 103 at Center for General Studies. He has attended so many national and international workshops and conferences, as well as consulted for federal government, Oyo state government, and private organizations in training politicians, public and civil servants. Dr. Lafenwa is at present the senior lecturer, sub-dean in the Faculty of Social Sciences and a member of ASU, as well as in the University of Ibadan, elected student member. He is happily married with children. It is my pleasure this morning to invite a distinguished scholar, a renowned political scientist conference. You are welcome, sir, Dr. Stephen Lafenwa.
Thank you very much, Samuel Ayoko. And I want to thank the organizer of this program. I can see Olariwaju Ogunubi, one of my friends, at the postgraduate, and I can see Daniel Dola. Thank you very much for the invitation. And I joined yesterday, and that yesterday was so powerful. Thank God you invited the next head of department, who will assume office by Monday yesterday, and I listened to her carefully. Well prepared, well presented, and well received the lecture. And I want to thank the barrister also, though I joined late. And there are so many questions that people asked, which were very, very significant for us to understand what inclusive governance, our roles, the role of government, and so on and so forth. Today, I want to present, on breaking the barriers to inclusive governance in Nigeria, the role of the state. When you talk about the state, when you talk about the state, you see that the state is an abstract entity in the sense we cannot touch the state, we cannot see the state, but we can feel the impact of the state through its agency that we refer to as government. So if we talk about state and without talking about the government, then we are making a big mistake. And that's why it's very, very important for us to understand the state with the perspective of the government, performing, the function of the state. And it is through the agency of government that we can feel the impact of the state. Be that as it may, inclusive governance is a very significant concept when it comes to governing society, governing the people, governing organization, and it is an integral feature or characteristic of what we call good governance agenda. When you look at it nowadays, many people talk about governance, but they don't understand what are the aspects of governance and what are the roles that we can play as citizens, and what's the role of government who is acting on behalf of the state. In fact, with the 2030 agenda, now sustainable development agenda, it is very clear that building inclusive states and societies is widely understood as a central concern for international development. So when we talk about inclusive governance, it's not something that we only relate to sustainable development here. We are talking about an issue which also affects international development. Let me give you an example. When we have issue with when there are issues with in Liberia and Sierra Leone, majority of Liberians, and Sierra Leoneans. They fled their country and they came to Nigeria. And that became an international issue and developmental concerns for Nigeria. In fact, up to today, some of the Sierra Leoneans and Liberians have refused to go. And they are also part of, Nigerians sharing our resources. So if there's a problem, of governance in Nigeria today, the spillover effect. We get to, Republic of Benin, Ghana, Togo, and the rest. Even Europe will not be spared. And also we know the use of Russian Ukrainian conflict is now affecting the entire world. So when we talk about inclusive governance, we are not talking about local issue, we are talking about an international issue. And people have already observed through historical trajectories that inclusive states and societies are more prosperous, effective, and resilient in the long run. Look at the United States of America, so inclusive that Barack Obama from Africa here became, a president. Can you just imagine, a Briton, despite that Britain, colonized Nigeria, becoming president of Nigeria, and there will not be political crisis, and people will not talk. So that is why most of our people are migrating to Europe, migrating to Canada, migrating to America, because of their inclusive governance policy. And there are a lot of barriers we know, which we are going to talk about. There are so many, but we are going to limit ourselves to some that are very critical, which we have to break for us to have inclusive governance in Nigeria. We know language barrier. So many of us cannot accommodate people that are speaking different language apart from our own native language. At times when we are doing admission, you talk about ELDS, educational-led developed states. Particular set of people from particular region always take advantage of that. And they all know, if you claim that you are Stephen Lafenwa and you are now claiming to be from Adamawa State, they will know from the language I speak, and they don't want to tolerate that. Ethnic tribal differences, there is these differences are there. In fact, up to today, majority of our students who work for youth service in different areas, hardly can they stay there and get a job and settle there, because they will tell them, where do you come from? Religion differences, this is, in fact, is very, very, it's coming, to the front border now that we are moving towards the election time. What people have been asking about, talking about Muslim tickets. You can just imagine, if with the different kind of challenges that we're facing with, as far as democracy and development is concerned, people are talking about Muslim, ticket. That is not something that we should adopt. And corruption, as we are going to see later, it has discriminative effect. Most of the time, the elite who are so corrupt are the one enjoying, the largest and the resources of the state. Why, the less privileged, masses of people are suffering. And there is no way corruption will allow you to accommodate or have an inclusive policy, because those who are benefiting will never allow those who are not benefiting to join the queue. And the rule of law, non-adherence to the rule of law. So many times I've argued in the classroom that it's not the constitution that are a problem. The constitution that we have that is a problem. It is lack of, constitutionalism, adherence, to the provisions in the constitution. We know that there may be anomalies, but with time we overcome those anomalies. But what we will discover is that, people don't, follow what is even written down in the constitution, particularly those political elite. Now, my argument is that if inclusive governance is very, very critical to good governance and sustainable development in Nigeria, in particular, and Africa in general, the role of state supposed also to be critical. And we have to consider that role of the state. So that is our preoccupation, in this discourse. We can move to the next one. Now, the first, where we start from is for us to understand what inclusive governance is. Because when you understand the concept, you may be able to understand some challenges or issues that surround that concept. And as I've said earlier, governance is a generic concept, and inclusive governance is a part, an integral part of governance. And I will say that I will start by defining what governance is all about. Francis Fukuyama, argued that governance relates to the ability of a state to make and enforce rules and to deliver services irrespective of the kind of regime that is in place. So whether it is democratic or authoritarian or a hybrid or combined, feature of both. That's what I'm saying, that whether you have, authoritarian regime, you have a democratic regime, you have a federal, with the system, you have non-federal system, governance is the recurring decimal. Services must be delivered. And when you talk about services to be delivered, those services, must have, there must be provision for them in the Constitution that people have the right to enjoy those services. And also the government has also the role to provide those services. Most of the time, people argue that, oh, government is not doing this. Do you have right? Even, we can also ask about government, whether they have a role to play, in providing some certain services. You look at economy, you see the kind of role that government is playing. Let me make it clear to some of our audience here. When you talk about the society, there are three critical factors that must play their role, accordingly. And if, the other one fails to, play its role, it will affect the others, or the other sectors supposed to come in. Number one has to do with market. The market forces, are invisible, but they affect what we do and what we refuse to do. If you go to the market now, it is not the government that will determine the price. If you say, oh, yes, I'm from Nigeria, I'm a Nigerian, I'm a citizen of this country, now give me Gari, a Congo of Gari. If you don't pay the correct amount, they won't give you anything. And it is when we have, the excesses of this market forces, are obvious, that we now have the state to come in. The state is, a force supposed to check the excesses of the market forces. Because when there is inflation, when there is, surplus, government is supposed to intervene so that people will not suffer. For example, now government is paying subsidy, for petroleum products. Because if they allow the market forces to go, to go on to fix the price, some of us will be out there protesting against the government. And also we know that government will also have its excesses, in exercising his role, exercising his power, playing his role. And that's why the another critical force, civil society, supposed to come in to check this, the excesses of the state. But what we have in Nigeria is that we have allowed market forces and government forces to continue to display their excesses without, any viral or stronger civil society to check those abuses and the excesses. And that is by the way. Then you can also look at governance as the ability of actors to perform, towards objectives and ambitions that derive from dynamic interaction, power and power struggle among actors of the state. The most important thing is that whatever method we are going to use, objectives are there to achieve. And in achieving those objectives, there are going to be interplay between, those forces that I've talked about struggling to control the heart of the state. And there are so many actors and not, state many state actors and non-state actors that affect our behavior and affect what we have and affect the kind of objective that we are set for ourselves to achieve in any particular society. And governance has to do with delivery of political goods. I've said it. Safety and security is one of those political goods. Please, that person has displayed music to help us. Okay, thank you very much. One of the political goods is safety and security. I always tell people that there is difference between safety and security. You may be safe and you are not secured, and you may be secured and you are not safe. You know how many security guards, mounting security, whatever, to protect our, politicians. Some of them have even been kidnapped. That means they are secured, but they're not safe. And some of us that we are not secured, we are more, we are safe. And we cannot just say that when somebody is safe, he is secured. No. And when you are secured, you are safe. So safety and security is part of the political goods that must be delivered through governance. Then rule of law, very, very important. Not rule of man and not rule by man. Is rule of law. That means whatever the law says. Transparency is another political good. Effective tackling of corruption, that is another political good. Participation in human rights. And we have human development. These are political goals that should be delivered through governance. And I said here, it is misnomer for us to talk about good governance or bad governance. Why? Every governance is supposed to be good. So when people talk about, good governance or we have bad governance, it shouldn't be the case. Our emphasis should be how to promote good governance in our country. We move on to the next one. Understanding inclusive governance. I said it is misnomer, but we still talk about it because, there are methods of governance that are bad. When you talk about ideals of good governance, you talk about equality, talk about justice, freedom, transparency, and accountability of government to the people. Good governance is enjoyed where there is equal treatment and opportunity for all citizens. Equal justice, compensation where people are wrong, promotion and appointment are based on merit and not favor, freedom to express your opinion and your view, criticizing government, easy access to independent and impartial courts with honest judges, and more importantly, adequate opportunity is given to the people to be part of their government. Integrity and probity in government amongst officials and agencies are also part of what referred to as the ideals of good governance. Now, what is inclusive governance, which is an integral part of the governance that we have talked about? Inclusive governance, refers to a normative sensibility that stands in favor of inclusion as the benchmark against which institution can be judged and also promoted. When you talk about it's a norm which may not be adhered to, because there is difference between what ought to and what is. What ought to, and what makes sense when you talk about governance is that we include every stakeholder. In fact, in the 2020 agenda for sustainable development by the United Nations, it is pledged that no one should be left behind. Inclusive governance is talking about no one will be left behind in making policies, in also getting results from the policy we have implemented. No one will be left behind. You may ask yourself, why do people reject government policy when we know that government stage have evils that we cannot avoid? They are unavoidable evils, because right from the time you are born up to the time they are going to one is going to the grave, the state, even in the grave, the state still has control, because somebody that is buried in burial may be removed from that place if they want to use the place for another thing. And that's why we should not be left behind when we are making decisions and when we are sharing the outcomes, or we are sharing the benefits of the outcomes of our decisions. In fact, the inclusive governance initiative that we have in Africa here, Sub-Saharan Africa, so to speak, talks about making African countries increasingly accountable to and inclusive of their entire populations, including sexual and gender minorities, who are often particularly marginalized and excluded. So when you talk about inclusive governance, it's not only local, it's not national, it is continental, it is international. And it has to do with two aspects. Inclusive governance has two aspects. The first one is inclusion as process. And also inclusion, has a outcome. We're talking about process-based inclusive governance and outcome-based inclusive governance. So, and both inclusion as a process and that of inclusion as an outcome, are very critical to development outcomes. If people are involved at the level of initiating ideas, formulating policy, implementing policy, people will identify with that policy. They will own that policy. And when the outcome, begin to yield what benefit, they are also part of it. So they will not blame government if anything goes wrong. And they will not only praise government if things are going in the right direction. They will also praise themselves. But when you exclude the people at the process level and you exclude them when the outcome is what, they will complain, there will be protest, there will be crisis, there will be demonstrations. People will have what we call they will lose confidence and trust in governance and in government. And that is why it is very, very important for us to pay attention to this inclusive governance. Then when you talk about process-based inclusion, it refers to how decisions are made. Who is included in decision-making processes and how and why. Whose voices can't, and how these dynamics and interactions shape both the nature and quality of decisions taken and how they are implemented. Let me give you an example of how the Constitution that we are presently operating in Nigeria came into being. It became imperative for Abdulsalam, the government, to take over when Abacha died in 1998. And instead of them to organize an all-inclusive meetings where the framework, the legal framework that we are going to build our democracy upon, they refuse to do that. They call certain people and they have them to go and give us the Constitution. And in the preamble, what is written there is that we, the people of Nigeria, you now ask yourself, are you part of the inclusion, the process? So why, did they, involve those who were involved and, excluded so many people? And that's why up to today, people are saying, let us abandon that, constitution. It's either we have a new one or we, reform and re-engineer that constitution. And the extent to which governor is more or less inclusive has to do with the extent to and ways in which people and groups that have been traditionally left out or marginalized, are incorporated. It depends. Those, that have been marginalized, the women. Let us be realistic. I'm not saying this because a woman gave birth to me, I have a wife or a daughter or whatever. When you talk about governance in Nigeria, it is men-based. And it has been so right from the time we were even in the pre-colonial era, up to the time we entered into the colonial era. And now that we are in the post-colonial era, you can imagine how many women are there in the National Assembly, Houses of Assembly. In fact, it is a taboo now in the National Assembly in Nigeria, you may not know, because there are certain, religious people from the North who will never allow a woman to become the Senate Speaker, a Senate President, and the House of Rep Speaker. It didn't last. It didn't last because some of them said, it's a taboo for them to be bowed down for a woman. They don't allow that in their own religion. So you can now see how women has been put aside in terms of decision making, and when the outcome comes, you see, who benefit. They don't benefit as much as men are benefiting from the existing policies. Young people, despite the fact that they have already made passed the bill into law, not too young to rule. How many young people are there? Even it may even surprise you that the youth officer of a particular party is of age 60 or 65 or 55. And that person will be tagged as the youth coordinator, the youth leader, who will never have any significant impact or input when they are making decisions. And when the largest come, how many of the young people are enjoying? In fact, I would say when I was growing up, what gave me hope then was that, I'm growing up and they always tell us, the youth of today are leaders of tomorrow. Who am I leading today now? Do I have, what we refer to as, do I have a 100 million naira to purchase a form or 40 million naira to purchase a form for the National Assembly election or whatever? Ethnic and religious, people, they have been marginalized. There's some group, and even you look at how they are creating states today. They are creating states to continue to marginalize the ethnic minorities. In the 60s, up to the time they created states in Nigeria, Kwara was part of the Southwest, the Yoruba land. Part of what we call Edo State today and Delta State, part of them are from the Yoruba land. And when you go to the north, the same thing. When you go to the east, the same thing. So, and that's why you hear everyone, all these ethnic minorities, crying of what? Marginalization. And religious groups, Muslim ticket, you see, Christian being killed, some Muslims have been marginalized in some certain organizations, and some Muslims, Christians have been marginalized in certain agencies of government. Disabled people. These are, in fact, if there is an international court indeed, they should have taken Nigeria to international court. How many people recruit disabled people? It is nowadays that people are now saying, okay, physically challenged people, we should talk about them. Transit and migrant populations. These are people that are supposed to be part of, the political process. Because they may be, may be in transit. I'm talking about foreigners, even the migrants. They also constitute, a significant, part of our country. they're supposed to play their roles. But how many of them, even some of them are even enjoying, some of those infrastructure better than those people who are citizens of the country. Let's move on. The outcome-based now. When you talk about the outcome-based inclusion, it refers to a question of distributional equity. How do you distribute, the resources? How do you redistribute? Who are the people you are providing for? Are you only doing it because of your own ethnic group? Because you come from an ethnic group? Or you are doing it because of, on the basis of religion, or because of the language you speak, or because of, some personal interest? How we, distribute developmental outcomes is part of what we call inclusion or inclusive governance, infrastructural, health, resources, education, water and sanitation, social welfare, justice, even justice. Some people, in fact, they have accused a particular ethnic group of enjoying more favor from the present world regime, even up to the time, up to the level of going to the police station. So, if it is this person from this particular ethnic group, I will just recourse to the court of God, because they know that they will never get justice. And look at the security issue. Why are they, politicizing security when it's supposed to be every person's, every citizen's, affair? Outcome-based inclusion speaks to who benefit from prosperity, one, and to what effect. So when you talk about inclusive governance, is when national or regional government enable the input of citizens in decision-making processes and allow them to be part of those who enjoy the gains of the outcomes. I think we have to move faster now because of our time. Inclusive governance is very significant because, one, it enables governmental policies to be contested so that we can have a better policy. When everybody criticize and pass their comment, put their input, you get the result for it. I will never forget 1977 great debate. That was what made us, everybody, whether you're academics or not academics, politicians or not politicians, legal luminaries and non-legal luminaries, they were allowed to make input. And that was why we stopped the parliamentary government and we adopted the presidential system of government, because they allow people from different sectors, different social background, environmental background, economic background, working together, to get our aspiration was promoted. And it's also important because, it will enable policy to reflect the experience of the people, the emotion of the people, which are everyday what, which are everyday what affair of the people. They know it's part of them. When you abandon, their aspiration of some of certain set of people, whether be it on the basis of sex or gender, based on religion and so on and so forth, you see that if that policy is good for everyone, certain people will reject it. And that means that policy is not good enough, to be implemented. It enables countries to unlock the potential of their diverse population. You see people, coming out to, even people in diaspora, they have something to offer. We allow them so that all of us, when we display our potentials, it will enable us to get the best, not the one we are experiencing what in Nigeria. Enabling citizens to participate in decision-making open space for more practical and fitting action that's more effective and sustainable. And also, it helps us to advance democratic values, peaceful pluralism, respect for diversity, human rights, and equality before the law, because everybody's involved. No one is left, behind. And also, it builds citizen confidence and trust in public policies, which is very, very critical. When public policy does not enjoy the confidence and trust of the people, let me tell you, it won't last. Even when you talk about building infrastructure, And that's why we lack a maintenance culture in Nigeria, because people don't own the project. They don't own the infrastructure. They think that, oh, it's government, property is everybody's property, and that's why we keep on repeating the same thing, every time, and we are not getting the kind of result that we want. And it makes citizens to accept governmental actions as legitimate. In Nigeria today, everything that government does, people don't see it as legitimate. Say, why? They question it. If those in the north are supporting, those in the south will be rejecting. And that's not what inclusive governance is all about. It helps people to have a sense of belonging and promote national unity. It also helps new policies to be compatible with the prevailing ideas in the society. There are so many things, so many policies that government have that are contrary to the prevailing ideas in our society. Most of those people who are in government today, you see that some of them are not even digital. They are not. Let me say they belong to the analog age, and that's why anything that has to do with digitalizing our affairs or issues, they don't support it. With inclusive governance, all members of the population should feel included and empowered to maintain or improve both personal well-being and that of their wider community. If they allow inclusive governance, it ensures representation and participation in decision-making processes for more just, and for just policy outcomes. It helps us, to have just policy outcomes that people will identify with, and they want to continue to identify with because they are involved. What are the barriers? I've been talking about cultural, ethnic, religious, whatever differences, and the challenges, which are very obvious in our heterogeneous entities, not only in Nigeria, even some African countries. And it has created a lot of problem. In fact, Sudan, South Sudan, came out of Sudan because of this, all these religious and ethnic differences. And up to today, they are not still enjoying the outcome of the policy of breaking away. So you can, imagine when we don't include, every stakeholder in policy making and in sharing the benefit of the policy outcome, we are going to have a lot of problems. And lack of access to protections guaranteed by law. Because in Nigeria, like in some of these African countries, our rule of law is very weak, only favoring the minority, the elite. And some people don't have access to legal system. Go to rural area, when you talk about the poor, going to the court, except, as our lawyer said yesterday, unless they will do it pro bono, how many of them, by the time they charge you, in fact, you are going to rest your case and say, let it be. Unenforced law or partiality in the administration of justice. These are very, very, obvious, when it comes to Nigeria. They constitute barriers to inclusive governance. Corruption, as I've said, is a major obstacle. Sustainable development and negatively impact on the lives of the poorest. You can see the discriminate impact of corruption today. Can you imagine how much is ASU asking federal government to use to finance the education, sector in the tertiary institutions? And a person stole 170 billion naira. The amount of money that ASU has gotten from Buhari's administration is not up to 70 billion naira. And that's what we're talking about. Their children are going to school. That's why they have stolen our money. And our own children are in their father's house. And that's, it has effect, because when these children that are not taken care of, they are not part of governance, when they grow up and become somebody, are they going to have sense of belonging? Are they going to do something very great for their country? Many developing countries like Nigeria struggle to connect enough domestic revenue to fund essential public services. That's why some people are better off and some people are not, and they are excluded. When it comes to health, even in UCH, there is what we call private suit for the rich. So if your illness is critical and supposed to be attended to in the private suit, if you don't have money, you will not go, they won't allow you to get there. Education, now, we see so many private universities springing up. How many of children from poor families can attend those private universities? I've taught in those private universities before, and I know what it means to have children over there. Water and sanitation, we all know there that government do not generate enough revenue to take care of everybody when it comes to all these issues. Social society and civic space are under threat in many countries in Africa. In fact, you see, when Dogo was reading my citation, I work with a civil society organization that produced a constitution, people-based constitution, before the advent of the Fourth Republic. We were sharing this view so that other people can, contribute, and we fine-tune whatever. The soldiers and whatever those agents of government did not allow us to do that. Some of us were arrested. Some of us were beaten. And you know what happened in the 1993 June 12 in Brooklyn? These are some of the the things that affected or constituting barriers to inclusive governance in Nigeria. Breaking the barriers now. Now let us talk about the role of the Nigerian state, which is our major problem. I'm sorry, I'm taking your time. The crisis of governance in Nigeria is a complex one, largely because it revolves around an organism called the state, so complex and sophisticated in nature. When you talk about, I told you about the nature of the state. You cannot, see the state. You can't touch the state. You can't smell the state. You can only feel the impact of the state through its agency government. And in terms of definition, there is confusion. People define, state, to suit their own purposes. And when it comes to characteristic of the state, you understand why the state is behaving the way it's behaving. The state has the monopoly of legitimate use of force. The state, also commands universal jurisdiction that controls everything within its jurisdiction. And its jurisdiction is compulsory. That means you have to obey. Even when they are doing something that is, inimical to your interest, you have to obey. Even when your fundamental human rights are abused, you have to obey. These are some of the things that is creating problem for inclusive governance when it comes to the role that the state should play. The Supreme Court of the United States, used the state to denote a people or a community of individuals united more or less closely in political relations, inhabiting temporarily or permanently the same country. Often it denotes only the country or territorial region inhabited by such community. Not infrequently, it is applied to the government under which the people would live. At other times, it represents the combined ideal of people, territory, and government. When you look at all these characteristics of the state that the Supreme Court used to define what state is more than that. When it comes to the state, in action. And since the state is an national identity, it performs its role and responsibility through the agency or apparatus of government, as I've said earlier. In our own, concerning the Nigerian state, the 1999 Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria provides for the roles and responsibility that government should play as far as inclusive governance is concerned. And they are contained under the fundamental objectives and directive principles of the state policies. If government, that is the agency of the state, has been, up and doing or complying or trying to achieve these fundamental objectives, in fact, inclusive governance will not be what we'll be discussing today. We'll see. The fundamental objectives are those principles laid down by the Constitution as ideals that the government should aim at when carrying out their policies. These are supposed to give direction to those who are in governance, how best the society should be ruled to the best advantage and benefit of what? Of all. And when you look at it, let me just, when you look at the section 13 and 14, it provides that all persons, organs, of government or any authority for that matter must act and exercise its power in conformity with the ideals set out under these objectives and principles, and provide the ideals that should guide the government in its relation with the people. You can go to the Constitution of Nigeria, you see there. The fundamental obligation of the state, particularly those levels of government, be it federal, state, and local government, number one is to observe the principle of democracy and social justice while carrying out the act of governance. The system of administration in this tier of government must be democratic, based on the principles of what is fair and just to the people. Recognize that power belongs to the people and that the constitution is supreme. Use this power to promote security and welfare of the people. Ensure that people participate in their government through a democratic process as laid down by the Constitution. In fact, the provision also, the provision in this regard, is meant to promote national unity, inclusivity, give a general sense of belonging, as well as promote unity among the people, since Nigeria is made up of different ethnic groups. So let us now go to the specifics now. When you're talking about inclusive governance, as far as the political objective is concerned, these are what the Nigerian state should do. They should, number one, ensure that there is no discrimination of any kind, either on the basis of origin, sex, religion, ethnic, or linguistic type. But we have already shot ourselves in the leg. When we are filling the form, go and check it. Any form you fill, they will tell you local government of origin. While is it there? They would even ask you religion. They will tell you sex. Is it not, are they not, part of those things that can make us to discriminate and exclude some people and favor others? Provision of adequate facilities. The citizens is free to live in any part of Nigeria without fear. But today, what do we have? That marriage is encouraged between people from different ethnic groups, religion, and background. That every Nigerian feels that he belongs and is involved in government. That if these political objectives have been achieved, why will we be talking about inclusive governance at this point in time? That every Nigerian is loyal to the nation. Can I say I'm loyal to the nation? That corruption and abuse of government is brought to our end. You can find that in section 15. There's social objectives. It is the state, duty or role to ensure that equality of right and opportunity. They ensure that there is equality of right and opportunity, sanctity and dignity of human person. The action of state through its agency government shall not be cruel and inhuman. The natural resources of the nation shall be used for all. The health, safety, and welfare of all persons in employment, and protection of children, young persons, and the aged against exploitation, deprivation, and neglect, should be protected. But what do we have today? These are some of the roles that states should play if you are going to have the economic objectives. That the national wealth is used for the happiness. Look at that. Freedom and welfare of every citizens by giving everybody equal opportunity to the wealth of the nation. That every person is given the opportunity to engage in any economic activity he chooses to be involved in. The economic activities, however, must not be unlawful or illegal. But today, because federal government or the state government or local government have refused to fulfill this objective, our young ones, women, are now going into unlawful and illegal economic activities. Where we have prostitution, we have Yahoo boys, we have trafficking and sex trafficking, human trafficking, and so on and so forth. The wealth, they should ensure that the wealth is not collected in a few hands, that is bridging the gap between the very rich and the very poor. If the gap is not too much, you will not see people blaming the government or blaming anybody that their policies are discriminatory. Imagine, a person, in the person of Dangote, building a refinery that Nigeria in the last 62 years, we cannot build. Imagine, and you know what it means. when they said the richest person in Africa is living in Nigeria, and the poorest, Nigeria happened to be the poorest capital, the capital of the, of the poor people in the whole world, that there is suitable and adequate shelter, reasonable minimum living wage, old age care, pensions, unemployment, and sick benefits are paid to all citizens. These are what we, promote inclusive governance. Today, a professor is collecting less than $1,000, $750 as a monthly wage, and you are talking about those National Assembly members collecting about 23 million naira, per month in this same nation. And educational objectives, which is, if I concern some of us, is, the states are directing its policies toward one, providing adequate education and equal opportunity at all levels. Hey, equal opportunity. I've been involving in the admission process for the past 10 or 15 years now. Up to today, there is still provision for catchment areas. There is provision for education less developed states. When somebody scored 280 and that person cannot get admission, and somebody with 201 is having admission letter, being admitted to university. What are we talking about? Students have been at home for almost 6 months, and you don't have anything to do about it. You have not done anything about it, and your children are graduating, and you have audacity to even post the picture on the Facebook. What kind of inclusive governance is that? When you are not treating yourself, when you are healed in Nigeria, and you are saying you are going to have a free healthcare services for who? Eradicate illiteracy by providing. Look at that. In the concept they put it as and when practicable. So when it is practicable. Free, compulsory primary education, free whatever, when it is practicable. When is it going to be practicable in Nigeria? And that's why we come to the limitations. All these fundamental objectives we have seen, they are not justiciable. That means no citizen can take the government to court if the government fails to fulfill any of the provision under fundamental objectives and directive of state policy. So because they have already told you when it is practicable. So if they promise you before election that they are going to do this, they are going to do that, if they fail to do it, should it not proper? Should it not be a proper thing to put in the question that we can take them to court? But now it's not there when it is practicable. So they are just directive principle, mere ideals that government should pursue and strive for as much as possible to achieve better living conditions for all our citizens. And that's why we are getting it wrong in Nigeria. Now, quickly, we are finishing in the next 5 minutes. Way forward. We have to adopt an inclusive governance policy. It's working in Canada for them. That we seek to foster inclusive and gender equal society where individuals, the state, the civil society, and the private sector interact to make decisions and allocate resources. I've never seen a country, a developed countries where government is doing it alone. No involvement of civil society. When civil society come with idea, they reject it. Private sector, that policy will affect. You are not involving them. That's why Naira is now in a free fall, whatever situation. Because you have not considered, the input of those who are dealing with the foreign currency. So those people will go to bank, deceive the bank, whatever executive, collect dollars, and go and sell in the black market. So these are, efforts should be focused on how to promote and protect our human rights. First thing, increase equitable access to a functioning justice system. Enhancement of participation of people in public life. Look at what happened in the Osun and Ekiti state. How many people registered to vote? How many people came out to actually to vote? You see the whatever. Who is deceiving who now? In the last election, 2019, over almost 80% registered to vote, and 15 million votes. Brought Buhari government into governance. You can imagine, out of 200 million, 50 million, then guaranteeing that public service work for everyone. this is, a critical role that states will be playing. So when you talk about promoting and protecting human rights, they can do that by strengthening the capacity of all actors in society to claim their rights and seek redress, or to uphold their obligation of responsibility to respect, protect, fulfill, or promote human rights. Increasing equitable access to a functioning justice system can be done by ensuring that justice services reach people in their communities and increasing people's legal awareness. How many people are aware of their rights? Most of the bills being passed by the National Assembly and the House of Assembly in the state, how many of them are we aware of? And how many people have, access, to legal system in Nigeria? To enhance participation in public life, we can do that by supporting local and national governance processes, by participating in politics, civic education, public sector reforms that increase diversity and inclusion. And lastly, ensuring that public service work for everyone by working with government at all levels and service provider to foster gender equality and enhance transparency and accountability, strengthening social accountability, improving public financial management, and using statistical data to guide service delivery and improvement. This is very, very important. Now they are planning for another census. Are they going to politicize it? Is it going to favor a particular religion, a particular region, or what, or not? Because we need data. This is the era of data management. And when we don't have data, inclusive governance will remain elusive. There are suggestions, by in the AU and the United Nations for each African country, Nigeria inclusive, that they should now, for over the next decade, what we should strive to address as far as inclusive governance is concerned is peaceful coexistence and economic development. Inequalities will be addressed. The effect of climate change, Lake Chad is shrinking and is causing farmer herders conflict. It's affecting, the relationship between the South and the North. Health pandemics, what coronavirus, monkeypox, and all the pauses have done to us in Nigeria. And enhance regional cooperation. We cannot do it alone, because what happens to country A will affect country B and C, as well as ensure the full effective participation in both the economic and political system of group that have historically been marginalized. We mentioned them. That each country must reflect upon its own governance and challenges and engage in robust national dialogue. We have to continue to talk. When we talk about federal system, where we have heterogeneous people, we continue to dialogue. And what should be the issue to dialogue on? Two critical questions. So we continue to live together? If yes, on what conditions? We should. Even when you are with your wife and children, you talk so as to manage your relationship, for the betterment of every member of the family. Not talk of a state that is composed of different kind of different type of people. And also, they are also, they have suggested that the African countries should engage in process-driven constitution making or reform to produce an agreed upon governing process characterized by the separation of powers with effective checks and balances, including a robust and politically active society, an independent judiciary, and a viable, free, and independent world press. Now, the process must be the one that we allow the constitution to be designed and adopted, in such a way that people participate and every stakeholder is included, to allow them to come up with constitutional principles that they actually design for themselves, and for them to ratify, not the one that is being made on their behalf, and they are now telling the whole world that they are the one that have made the constitution. And they should engage national dialogue to help their citizens understand and better appreciate the importance of the constitution to governance generally and the protection of human rights in particular. Through this process, citizens can determine how to strengthen their national constitutions. Because even in the US, they have amendments. It's not the matter of because it's favoring me, it's favoring others, and it's not favoring me, we should not do that, we should not do this. We should consider the national interest above our private and individual interest. Thank you for your attention, and I'm very sorry for taking your time.
Okay, thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much, sir, for that insightful presentation. While we wait for our next speaker, because the next session will be starting soon, and while we wait for Professor Ayede to join us, we're going to be taking a couple of questions. So if you have a question, you can either drop your question in the comment box, or you can unmute to speak. Mr. Salahu, I can see that you are raising your hand. Can you please ask your question?
Good morning, everybody. Once again.
Good morning.
Hello. Now, one, I want to first thank our dear Egbon, our lecturer, Dr. Lafenwa, for that presentation. In fact, from the whole presentation, one may not even say, one will be asking him said that when will I ask the question? But nevertheless, as a student, we must have way to build our sense of belonging. Now, sir, I want to ask questions from the perspective of what we can call one of the causes of this inclusive government yourself. From my own understanding, I believe that in Nigeria, I want to take Nigeria as a case study. The inadequate inclusion, I want to use the word inadequate, inclusive government, has affected the administration and the development of Nigeria as we have also seen. But anytime we raise this question of, let me borrow your word, bad governance, they normally attach it to the lack of political will to drive the system. I now want to ask, what are those ingredients or indices of a political will to provide inclusive government that Nigeria is lacking? That is
ingredient of what? Sorry, please.
Ingredient of political will. The political will.
Okay. Political will, yes.
Valid. That is number one. Then number two, Nigeria has a multi-phase, the word diverse, where there are diverse ethnic groups. If you look at this upcoming 2003 election now, ethnicity has surfaced in the sense that the three dominant political parties is having ethnic identity. The North, the South, and that of the Southwest and the Southeast, which is you can say this is the product of what happened during the issue of a McCarthy constitution that led to the downfall of that McCarthy constitution, where we were having three political parties then that were dominantly showcasing the identity of the ethnic group. So as we have it here now, are we not even taking a step back to the replication of what happened during that time as a country, as an independent country this time around? Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Before Dr. would respond to the question, we would like to take all the questions at once. So if you have any other questions or any other question for you can put the question in the chat box, or you can simply unmute your mic to speak. And while we wait for that, I actually have a question that I would like to ask. It appears that when we talk about inclusive governance in Nigeria, one of the major challenges is that it has always not been in the interest of the elites. The elites have always wanted to keep the people as far away from governance as possible. So how do we address the issue? How do we best address this issue of the Nigerian elites trying to cage the people, trying to put them away from governance processes? So,
Thank you.
Mr. Afis, please, you can ask your question.
Okay, my question is kind of similar to what you just asked now, but mine is more or less like empirical question. Thank you, Doctor, for your lecture. My
Thank you
question
very much.
is, considering the fundamental objective of Nigerian state, which you've highlighted in the course of your lecture, and we've seen the languages and the response of Nigerian political elites when it's come to inclusive governance. Just a week ago, a petition was sent from the United States to represent the people of Tiv in Benue State in order to express their grievances in the House of Representatives. And the bill was immediately rejected by the deputy, one of the officers presiding over the House, without even considering the constitutional provision that addressed the position of Nigerian in diaspora. And the response to that question was, they cannot take a petition from Nigerian in diaspora speaking on security issues in Nigeria. Now, my question is, if we are to have inclusive governance and Nigerians are to participate in democratic processes, policy formulation and implementation, and the political elite seems not to share the same ideology when it comes to this discourse, then how best do we hold these people accountable to ensure that we have this inclusive governance? Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can I respond now?
Very soon, sir.
Okay.
I'd like to know if we have any other questions. Do we have any other question? Okay, in the absence of question, you can respond, sir.
Okay, thank you very much. Let me start with a question talking about political will. Political will is to me is a vague concept, in the sense that when you try to conceptualize it, you see that it's either you are biased depending on where you belong to. When a politician defines political will, they will tell you, they are putting their best. They have done the best they could do. But you will see it in their commitment. And also you see it in the process of making their policy, and also in the outcomes. The ingredients of political commitment supposed to be something that is derived from the people. And we're supposed to actualize that when we are voting for these people. Somebody who has nothing to do with providing electricity will be telling you, when I get there, I will give you 24/7 electricity. And foolishly we go and vote for that person. How can the councillor be telling you he will increase your wage? Is it in the purview of the councillors to do that? Our politicians, that what is driving them in governance is their private interest, which is being colored under what? Public interest. And that is why they don't demonstrate political will or political or commitment, show commitment when it comes to implementation of policies that will favor the people. So we get that right, because you are not expecting somebody who have invested almost 2 billion to get into an office to go and demonstrate political commitment or will to do what will favor you. And that's why we need to restructure. We need to have a constitution that will make all those fundamental objectives justiciable, that we can take them to court. Look at what Buhari's promised us in 2015, 2019. Which of them, can you tell me, they have demonstrated political will to solve the problem that they have demonstrated political will to solve? Then, when it comes, to the issue of the politician caging the masses, it is the problem of the system. I'm telling you, the system that we adopted right from independence era is really affecting us. It is a system that does not want input from the people, apart from support. No demand. They don't want you to, put pressure on them, but they want support from you. Even that is why when there is a military takeover, 1 year they will try to do something to garner legitimacy. After that, they begin to go that way. How can we break that a barrier? One, by continuing to what? Create awareness about the problem that is facing Nigerians, facing us, and mobilize the people of the same mind to address this issue. Enough is enough of talking about, we students from University of Ibadan, students from the protest we did on Tuesday, the labor union, students almost, they were almost fighting one another. Maybe because they have given them something. And you see, in fact, some of those people who participated in the protest, they were taking selfie, gathering themselves together and taking their selfie. Somebody now said, can you be in the forefront and be taking selfie? That is the problem that we have. We continue to have leaders that have no clue about what we call good governance. And that is why we always talk about bad governance, because we, the people, do not do the right thing at the right time. Now, election is coming now. Some will be caged by 2,000 naira. Some will continue in that, slave camp, because of 5,000 naira. Some will be taken because of 100,000 naira. So these are some of the things even if you collect money, if they give you money and you refuse, and your party, is not in power, don't forget the fact that that is it for today. Tomorrow may change, and people will be looking for you if you demonstrate your integrity. And can you remind me the third question, please? Sorry. Hello?
The third question was about the resistance of the House of Representatives as regards to petition that was sent.
Petition, okay, that was sent by the UN. When it comes to issues that affect the interests of the so-called political elite, they will never, or they want to jeopardize their interest, they will never want to do that. That's why people were talking about restructuring. We have to put pressure as civil society group, as student group, as women group, all those marginalized groups. If you continue to put pressure, that's why I'm surprised that people have shifted from they are calling for restructuring now to prepare for election. Can we conduct election with this kind of system and we still we get a different result? I will tell you no. We put pressure on them to do the right thing by restructuring the system in such a way that people can be made accountable and they can be punished if they are found wanting. We should not stop. By rejecting it that the National Assembly is not a signal that that's the end of that issue. They can still continue to mount pressure from outside. We have seen some people, some government being toppled, being displaced from outside. So we should not continue to keep quiet because those people can never, garner political will or commitment to restructure the system. And that is why I will still go with what Afe Babalola said. Some people say that, it's not possible. There is nothing impossible in this world. That let us allow these, politicians to end their tenure. After that, don't let us run into election like we did in 1999. We didn't resolve the issue of constitutional issues, the legal issue of the legal framework upon which we are going to build our democracy. We rush into it, and now we are facing the problem. Now we have failed for over 23 years now. Should we continue to do the same thing in the same way and expect different results? No. Let us continue to put pressure. Let involve more than ever before. That's why I encourage the organizer of this program to continue. Let's start the dialogue from now. People may not join us now. I'm telling you, very soon, some people will join. And when we get, wherever we get to, we will continue to talk about, what we are discussing here. And let us, see. Let's just continue to convince so many people so that when we have the same interest and we can mobilize ourselves, it's a matter of time. All those things we are talking about, we are going to, or where we are moving to, we will get there. So thank you very much for those beautiful questions that you have asked. And I want to thank the organizer again. You have done a very good work, and I pray that God will continue to be with you. Thank you very much.
Amen, sir. Thank you very much for that beautiful presentation. We hope to continue to engage with you in the future. We are confident that when next we call upon you, you would be available.
Yes.